Alright, it's time to talk about Mars. Before we get into the numbers and all that jazz, I gotta talk about something. Mars is named after the Roman god of war. It's super fitting because just like Mars in mythology, everything this planet has set out to do has been an absolute failure. And if you go from that angle, just like how Minerva was the favorite child of Jupiter, the Earth is the favorite child of our solar system, and everything that Earth did, Mars tried and just couldn't. Let's get into those numbers. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun at 142 million miles away. It orbits the Sun at 14.5 miles an hour. This is 4 miles slower than Earth, and it makes sense when you factor in that, yeah, Mars is farther away from the Sun than Earth is, so the effect of gravity isn't as intense for it. Over time, that 4 mile difference adds up. The Martian year is equivalent to 687 Earth days, which means that every 8 years, Earth laps Mars in its orbit. It's not really important, but I do think it's a fun fact so long as my math checks out. The surface area of this planet is 55.91 million square miles, which means it's 140.99 square miles smaller than Earth. Bear with me on this one. If you got metaphysical powers and you want to make a planetary Kinder Surprise egg, you could fit 6 whole Mars moose into Earth. And it'd be pretty awesome, dude. That whole tangent aside, Mars and Earth have a similar composition. They both have a crust, mantle, and core. Mars doesn't have tectonic plates, which is actually normal. Only Earth and one of Jupiter's moons, Europa, have plate tectonics. Regardless, Mars itself is very similar in composition to the Earth, and I feel kind of bad about it. Like, Mercury has stuff going on. Venus is hell the planet, but Mars is just like less cool Earth. Let's talk about the surface. You gotta break it into north and south when it comes to Mars. Up north, it's pretty smooth. You got sand all over the place. This is because there was an ocean up there that dried up. I'll explain that later. Now, down south, you have a bunch of canyons and valleys, which is the perfect segue to talk about some of the cool things on Mars. Despite all the crap and garbage I've talked on Mars, it does have a couple of things going for it. It has both the highest and lowest point in our solar system. The highest point is this dome volcano called Olympus Mons. It is the size of Arizona and 16 miles above sea level. Here on Earth, the highest point is Mount Everest, and it's only 5.5 miles above sea level. So when you compare the two, that means that you would need to stack 3 Mount Everest on top of each other to rival this dome volcano. Back on the south side of Mars, we have this huge expanse of canyons and valleys. It kind of forms this weird maze-like complex. And here we find the lowest valley in our solar system called the Valles Marineris, which is 2,500 miles across. I'm going to use Earth as a reference point again because we live on Earth, we know the place, it's pretty swell. The Grand Canyon is only 277 miles across, which means that the Valles Marineris is a little less than 10 times longer. And if you go down deep enough, you can find out that in this valley, it can reach a depth of 6 miles deep, which means that this valley is deeper than Mount Everest is high. But back to rock. Mars is mostly sedimentary and igneous rock. There's so much rock on Mars, it's exhausting. There's olivine, which is this pretty stuff with a green color. Then you have progenes, who are losers with only one chain silicate. You have amphiboles, which are the cooler pryogenes with a double chain silicate. You have carbonates, that are the salts left over from when water was there. You have sulfates, who wants to talk about them. Silicates, and they're pretty crazy structures that make up clay, talcs, and mica, a bunch more. Then you have feldspars, which are rocks with aluminum oxide, or if you want to sound cool to your chemist friends, call them alumina. And you have so much iron. There's so much iron on this planet. A bunch of it is iron, which is mind-racking because with iron being as magnetic as it is, there is no magnetic field on Mars, which is why it sucks, and I'm about to get into that. Let's go back in time. Mars is just starting off. It's doing fine. Water's flowing here and there. It freezes in the winter, melts in the summer. It rains from time to time. And under normal circumstances, that'd be perfect for growing life and maintaining it. But Mars has a couple of problems. It has a really weak atmosphere, and that it's barely an atmosphere at all. But more importantly, it has no magnetic field, which means that this big baddie called the sun can just bully it into submission. And while on Earth, we can look at the sun and talk about how it gives us vitamin D, keeps us warm, helps the plants grow. We have to remember that it's actually a harbinger of death and destruction. One day it will expand and swallow the planets, then it will collapse and swallow everything else as it's a black hole. And until then, it will give us cancer, but that's not its only weapon. And sometimes it's filled with so much angst and rage that it can't even contain it, and it shoots out solar winds. Solar winds are these waves of magnetic energy shot out from the sun. It's plasma heading towards a planet, and if your planet has a magnetic field like Earth, it'll just bounce off and everything's fine. Mars doesn't have a field like that, so it would hit the water and dry it up, and it'd hit the atmosphere and make it weaker. Take into account that Mars also has a wind pressure system going on, so the wind would come up and dry whatever water was left, which is why we have salts there now. It's really nasty, and the more windstorms that happen, We call this a positive feedback loop, where things started off bad and they just got worse. Granted, Mars still has a lot of water. It's frozen because it's really cold on Mars. You can look forward to negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 60 Celsius if you want to go down that route. And it gets even worse in winter. So we have ice caps in both the northern and southern hemispheres, and they don't really melt. It doesn't get that hot on Mars. So between those two icy caps, we just have the red planet we know. That is about it for Mars. It has 2 moons, but they don't really do anything. I have nothing more to say on this planet. Thank you for watching the vid. Maybe check out some others if you want to. If not, thanks for dropping by anyways, and see you next time.